What's up guys, welcome to another video at Movement Mechanics. Today I'm going to give you an interesting topic in order to predict when you have to deload, when you can attain peak, when you should imply more and more progressive overload in order to get that adaptation in your body, and also when are you at the red zone where you can undergo overtraining. So we are going to talk about an important topic today, which is load monitoring. Now, this video is inspired by one of my subscribers who commented in a video that he wants a video specifically targeting how to do load monitoring. So I'm going to give you two methods which I personally use, and those methods are calculated methods, and the sheets are going to be in the description. So you can find the links for those sheets in the description. So there are various other methods for load monitoring, but I personally use the ACWR, which is Acute Chronic Workload Ratio method, and the Monotony and Strain method. So for ACWR I use mainly for team sports, and for Monotony and Strain I generally use them for individual sports. So let's find out what are these two methods and understand some movement mechanics. Before we get towards the good part, which is what is ACWR, what is monotony and strain, and how do we calculate it, first let's briefly understand what is load. So load is basically the amount of work done by the human body. For example, this work done can be in the gym, your conditioning sessions, your skill sessions, or any other sessions which you are doing. Now for example, when we calculate about the load in the gym, we take the repetitions, the sets, the weight lifted, and sometimes the body weight as well. Now you multiply all these factors and you get the volume load. Now this load is done for each and every exercise for the particular gym session, and then you get numbers for the weekly basis. Then you have to do certain amount of calculation so that you get the total load for the month, and then you understand whether you are in the optimum zone or you are in the red flag zone or you are not loading your body enough. So there are various methods which you can use, such as rate of perceived exertion, rep in reserve method, the heart rate method, and various others. I personally use rate of perceived exertion, which is a very simple method, though it is subjective in nature, but it doesn't require any fancy equipment. It just requires a couple of Excel sheets and Google Forms, so that you get everything into that format. You just put in the numbers and you get the subjective load for each and every session and each and every exercise, so that it is very inexpensive. You don't require any fancy equipment for it. So there are like expensive methods as well, such as the heart rate monitoring method, which is going to cost you lakhs, GPS method, and stuff like that. So if you are a newbie or you don't have that much of budget, and I personally suggest that taking all this equipment is very fancy and it becomes very difficult. So the RBE method is one of the best methods, and I personally love the RBE method. So I'm going to talk about this method today itself, and how my two sheets, which is ACWR and monotony and strain sheet, I use in order to calculate the load. So what is RPE? So RPE stands for, as I said, rate of perceived exertion. Now let's say you have done a heavy intense MS training session, which is your conditioning session, and that was at a brutal level. So this RPE scale starts from 1 to 10. So 1 is very low, which is very easy, and 10 is extremely difficult, which is in the red zone. So you have to, based on your perceived exertion of that particular session, you have to give a rating from 1 to 10, and that is your RPE. Now this rating has to be given not immediately after your session, but just before you go to sleep, because the reason being, if you give it immediately after your session, of course the RPE is going to be on the higher side because you are extremely fatigued. But if you allow your body to recover while you take in your nutrition, and just before you go to sleep, if you give that rating would be much more valid than immediately given after your session. So make sure that if you are giving RPE, it should be just before you sleep and not immediately after your session. So the first method which I use for load monitoring is Acute to Chronic Workload Ratio, which also stands for ACWR. Now this is a sheet which I use for ACWR. Now this is an automated sheet, and we just need to input the numbers, which is RP and minutes, and you get the workload factor. So the session duration, you need to be very careful that normally I didn't allow the athletes to include the warm-up duration, because the warm-up is not that intensive. It is not going to create fatigue in the body. It is just going to activate your central nervous system, activate your muscles, mobilize the joints, stuff like that. So it is not fatiguing. So I generally use the duration of the main session. For example, let's say the session is for 2 hours and the warm-up is for roughly half an hour, and the main session is for like 1 hour 15 minutes, and finally it is the cool down. So normally I don't include the initial half an hour as well as the final 15 minutes, which is the cool down and the warm ups. I just include the main duration of the session so that you get more accurate data of the perceived exertion of the athlete. Now in this sheet you can see that onto the left side there are various session names, and there are 3 columns onto the right side which says RP, minutes and workload factor. Now out of these 3 columns you just need to fill in the RP as well as the minutes column. You don't need to touch the workload factor column because you just need to input the numbers and it would get calculated over here as you can see on the screen. So if you scroll down the sheet, you can see that you get the total acute workload as well as the acute workload for each and every session. Now, if you go to the next sheet, which is the summary, you get the acute to chronic workload of each and every session as well as the total acute to chronic workload. Now, this ACWR is calculated for a tenure of 5 weeks. So the first 4 weeks are basically the chronic weeks and the last week is acute week. So we kind of compare the 5th week with the first 4 weeks in order to get the ACWR, which is acute to chronic workload ratio. So the second methodology which I use for load monitoring is monotony and strain. So the word monotony stands for the variability of the load on daily basis. For instance, an athlete is doing 3 gym sessions. So Monday, Wednesday and Friday are his gym days. So on Monday he would be going on say 95% of his 1 RM. On Wednesday he would be doing a moderate weight of say 75%, and on Friday he would be doing another moderate day of say 80%. So this is the variability of the 3 training session, and this is the monotony, and this can happen for other sessions as well. For example, conditioning, on Tuesday he would be doing high intense conditioning sessions, say sprinting session which is extremely central nervous system fatiguing. On Thursday he would be doing a very easy run which is not that fatiguing, in order to have that load monitoring done properly for the week. So that is monotony, which is variability in the load on day-to-day basis. Secondly comes the strain. Strain is basically amount of stress which is put onto the body of the athlete when he undergoes training session. So that is what strain is all about. Now when we talk about monotony and strain, it is imperative that these 2 factors go hand in hand, and there is another sheet which I am sharing with you on the screen right now, which I use for calculating monotony and strain. Now again, if you can see in this sheet, I am using again the same concept, which is RP, minutes and the total workload. Again, this is an automated sheet. You just need to input the RP and the minutes. Again, the same how I have explained about inputting the minutes, not considering the warm-ups and the cool down, just consider the duration of the minutes which you have done the main session. If you scroll down the sheet, there is something called as standard deviation, mean load, strain, weekly load and monotony. Now you don't need to worry about anything. You just need to input the RP and the minutes and you will get everything calculated over here. Once you do this, you get the monotony and strain for a particular month, and I'm going to tell you the exact ratios which are necessary for both the ACWR and monotony, which are going to give you the green zones of your training. Alright, so you got all the data, all the numbers, but how do you decide whether an athlete is in the green zone or is in the red zone? So when we talk about ACWR, the ideal ratio is 0.8 to 1.3 to 1.5. Now I have stretched this ratio to 1.3 to 1.5 because if it is from 1.3 to 1.5, the athlete is overreaching, which is kind of good when it comes to super compensation and adaptations, but if it is above 1.5, that is red flag. On the other hand, if it is below 0.8, that means the athlete is not getting enough load from the training sessions. So the ideal ratio has to be between these numbers which I just said, which is 0.8 to 1.3 to 1.5. On the other hand, when we talk about monotony and strain, the ideal ratio is again 1.20 to 1.80. I even take into consideration 1.90. So anything above 1.90, it is a red zone, which means that the athlete is overtraining. Anything which is below 1.20, that means the athlete is not getting enough load from the day-to-day training activities. Now this is how you interpret the data from your training sessions. Now with the help of load monitoring, you can periodize your training sessions very accurately. You can even understand when the athlete is overtraining and when do you need to taper the athlete, or when do you need to push more from the load perspective to athlete based on the data. Say for instance, let's take an example of athlete A and athlete B. Athlete A has got a monotony say of 1.20. Though this monotony is onto the mark, which is 1.20, but it should be slightly bit more, which should be around 150 to 160. Now if you know that it is just close to 120, you can push more towards the athlete in the next training cycle. On the other hand, if an athlete who has been whose load has been monitored with the help of ACWR has got a ACWR ratio say of 1.7, that means the athlete is in red zone. He or she is overtraining. Now you need to pull him back or her back so that he gets that deload week, he tapers down, and that load comes into the golden ratio zone. It is very important for SNC professionals to monitor load of the athlete so that we can prevent overtraining, we can prevent injuries, we can even allow the athlete to be in his peak at the right time with the help of load monitoring. So you need to take in consideration various factors. So I'm going to link out these two sheets, of course, but another set of Google form which I use in order to get a bit more accurate data. For instance, all the RPE markers and stuff like that in a different Google form, and there is a wellness sheet which I utilize so that you can correlate why the RPE was low or why the RPE was high, though the session was easy. For instance, someone who has got bit of mood swings on the day because of any personal issue or any mental issue he or she is going under would be having a higher RPE, though the session was easy as compared to other athletes. So we can correlate this data and get a bit more accurate RPE and acute to chronic workload ratio or monotony and strain. So I'm going to link up Google Forms and a couple of sheets over here so that you go through all those sheets and forms, and you can also start monitoring load of your athletes. Alright guys, that was it for load monitoring from my side. Now this video was possible because that you wanted me to create something regarding load monitoring and how to calculate volume for athletes. Now that means I've said this in previous videos as well, I respect your comments and I love your comments, so keep on giving me suggestions so that I can create more and more content which you want to see in the future. On that note, if you have loved this video, make sure you hit the like, the share, the subscribe, as well as the notification bell icon so that you never miss a video whenever I'm uploading a new one. Also, if you've got any comments or doubts regarding this video, or again, if you've got any other video suggestions which you know I'm going to cover in the future, make sure you drop that in the comment section. Alright guys, thanks for watching the video till the very end. See you in the next one.